Chapter 4. Gospel Waggon. Harold left Otago in April 1901 and returned to Australia, where he teamed up with his brother Norman in Terang and Victoria. They worked together in Terang and the surrounding districts from May to July that year. Harold and Norman focused their work on Home Handbook, a health manual. The Lord had counselled the church through Sister White that there can be no better preparation for the coming of the Lord and for the reception of other truths than to arouse the people to see the evils of this age and to stir them to reformation from self-indulgence and unhealthful living. Harold and Norman purchased a tandem bicycle for transport. One day they had to cycle down a steep hill wryly known as Gentle Annie. Harold was in front and Norman behind. Before long they lost control of their speed. Hurtling down Gentle Annie, it seemed as if disaster beckoned. Norman called out, "Lord, save us." They managed to stay on the bicycle and it gradually slowed to a stop after they reached the bottom of the hill. Harold and Norman had been through some scrapes together, but few matched the excitement of this one. It was some minutes before their racing hearts returned to normal. Their work took them all over country Victoria. Harold worked in Bioduck in August and the Hamilton district in Western Victoria in September, while Norman worked in Tooradin. Harold worked in Moralla in October, while Norman worked in South Gippsland. In December, Harold and Norman joined other colporteurs at the camp meeting in Brunswick, Melbourne. They were able to exchange experiences with other colporteurs, while the rest and change refreshed their spirits after a year of exacting work. Classes were held for colporteurs at the camp meeting. For a church with a small membership, the printed word was an effective way of getting its message to the people. Many who could not hear an evangelist speak could read the truth. Books were silent messengers of truth, and colporteurs were frontline agents in the missionary program of the church. Some who purchased books from colporteurs put them on the shelf and seldom looked at them. But God has care for His truth, and often sickness or misfortune entered homes and the books were sought for and read. Through them, God sent peace and hope and rest to souls. Others, because of prejudice, never knew the truth unless it was brought to their door and left in their homes. Harold understood the importance of the work in which he was engaged, and early in 1902 he fitted out a wagon for his work in rural Victoria. He called it the Gospel Waggon. It enabled Harold to display his books most effectively. All grand enterprises for God meet opposition from God's enemy, Satan, and this proved true for Harold's work with the Gospel Waggon. Endeavours were made to hinder his work and to destroy his wagon and horse. Harold also had narrow escapes from personal injury. On February 18, Harold wrote in a report from east of Melbourne, "This is Wednesday morning. I'm remaining with these people who have lately accepted the truth. I go out and work the place as far as I can and return in the evening and give Bible readings, which they thoroughly enjoy. You will be glad to know that they are accepting every phase of the truth. They have already expressed a wish to be baptized and unite with the church. Truly God's hand is in the mission of this gospel wagon." Harold continued, "I must press on. There are other souls waiting for the truth and I must hunt them out. They told me that the burden of their hearts had been that God would send them more light, and they believe that this is a direct answer to their prayers." In another report of February 27, Harold wrote, "God has indeed been with me in my work, and I am full of courage to go on with it, being confident of success. Because if God is with me, what have I to fear? Man cannot make me afraid. I truly believe that this is the work that God has called me for. Satan has tried to overthrow the work, but angels of God protected it, and my heart rejoices with yours in the success that has attended the work. The two families that have taken their stand seem firm in the truth. Their opposition has just begun, but the more it rages, the firmer they get. This is my reason for remaining here this week, to hold Bible readings and to help them to be firmly grounded in the truth. There are also others who have shown interest in attending the studies. I believe that some will take their stand. I am visiting some in the afternoons and holding readings with them. Last Sunday I spoke to about 14. 10 of whom were strangers, and in the evening we had 14 strangers. Questions were asked which I endeavoured to answer. Some opposition was manifested, but this really helped to impress the truth on the minds of the others more than anything else. Harold stayed in this place until March 2, when he wrote, "I held 2 meetings today which were good. I leave for the next town. These brethren are staunch in the truth and full of courage. We would ask that this work be remembered in the prayers of God's people continually." Harold moved on to Trafalgar and worked there during March. He found some people there yearning for the truth. One family and one lady from another family accepted the Adventist message. A few others were considering the acceptance of the message. In April, Harold moved to the Wimmera in Western Victoria. The Wimmera was a rich pastoral area. He remained in the region from April to September. In July, Harold focused his efforts in the town of Rupinyup. In July, Norman worked in Albury, a town on the border between Victoria and New South Wales. Harold continued his work in rural Victoria throughout 1902, but early in 1903 he received a call from Pastor Hilliard, President of the Tasmanian Conference, to work as Field Missionary Secretary or State Agent in Tasmania. This position involved responsibility for the colporteurs in the field in the state of Tasmania. He arrived in February 1903 and immediately took up his duties. Before long, Norman joined him in Tasmania. At the end of the fiscal year, on June 30, 1903, there were 12 colporteurs in the field. In October, Harold and Norman worked the Huon River region to the southwest of Hobart. In December, Harold was reappointed as state agent for colporteurs in Tasmania. In 1904, after 12 months in Tasmania, Harold found himself back in the Wimmera in Victoria, having received a call from the Victorian Conference. He worked in Willinabreena in July, Bangarang in August and Warwick-Nabil in September. In Warwick-Nabil, Harold renewed his association with William Fletcher, a fellow student at Avondale College and his predecessor as state agent in Tasmania. In November, Harold was appointed the state agent for the Victorian Conference, working from Oxford Chambers in Burke Street, Melbourne. Writing in the Australasian Record in April 1940, Walter Edwards began a series of reminiscences of his colporteuring adventures. This is how he began the series, remembering his work under Harold's supervision in 1904. The beautiful harmony of that system of truth taught by Seventh-day Adventists charmed my heart from the first day that these things were brought to my attention, especially the order of events connected with the judgment and the second coming of Christ. For a long time my mind was filled with an intense longing to share these glorious truths with others who had never heard the glad tidings of the Master's return. In the year 1904 I left home to enter the colporteur work, being a very raw recruit indeed, because I had no experience of public work of any kind. Brother H.C. Harker, then State Agent of Victoria, sent word for me to go down by train to Maffra, Gippsland, to start work with the coming King, in conjunction with a band of workers he was coaching down there. According to a pre-arranged plan, when I stepped off the train at Maffra, I carried in my hand a copy of the Signs of the Times as a mark of identification, whereupon Brother Harker stepped up and gripped me by the hand, and then conducted me to the lodging of this little band operating in that district. Promptly the next morning, Brother Harker and I set out on what was to me a thrilling adventure, canvassing around the Denison district. Brother Harker doing the canvassing while I looked on and prayed for success, endeavouring all the time to learn all I could. During the course of the day he secured 12 orders, and as I watched him book order after order, I thought how easy it all was, but of course he was an expert, and I had yet to learn how hard it was for me. For several days my leader did all the canvassing and then decided to let me have a try. I know he thought that I would never make a colporteur, but after he stood and watched me take an order in the first house we went to, he said, "I'm going back to Melbourne." But I found as I went along that I didn't know much about real salesmanship, though I am certain that the Lord blessed me when I looked to him for help. Harold continued his work through 1905 as state agent for the Victorian Conference. He was reappointed to this position in March 1906. Harold was now 28 years of age. Since leaving Avondale College, he had lived an itinerant life for more than 5 years in New Zealand, Victoria and Tasmania, serving the church as a coal porter or state agent. Norman was now married, but Harold remained without a life partner. But God had a surprise in store for him. Early in 1906, he met 17-year-old Anne Gadsden.